98% of the comedians are left wing, and then there's just you who's not.
No one really gave a shit, and then Brexit happened, and I voted leave, and then everything changed. The BBC and other places were like, hang on. It was just a tragic story, really. But in the 2010s, it lost its balls, comedy. People were genuinely worried. The truth is, I probably did self-censor during that period, and that it's not something I'm proud of.
What did happen with that Ava Santina?
Should there be a minister for men? And then Laurence Fox, that whole thing with GB News.
I wouldn't shag that.
That moment was just a really bizarre moment.
I know it's annoying when creators ask you to subscribe, but since I started, the channel's grown 10 times faster. If you don't sub, YouTube probably won't show you the next episode. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Hit subscribe. Geoff Norcott, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
What does one say to that? Welcome to the show. What can you say?
I was just, I was a little bit sideswiped. You just, that is the cleanest start to any show I've ever done. Good, yeah. Let's crack into it.
I think I saw Chris Williamson do that. He was just like, Matthew McConaughey.
Well, in a lot of television industry, there's a lot of fanning around, frankly. A lot of records that run for like 3 hours and stuff like that. I was actually doing a thing with Jeremy Clarkson where I was writing for Clarkson on TV.
Oh, yeah.
And they had this classic long record, and they sort of like, and he's like, doesn't piss about, he's a big figure. And then so they said to him, could you say this, Jeremy? We're almost certainly not going to use it. And he said, well, if we're not going to use it, why the fuck am I saying it? And I was like, unbelievable. Someone finally said it. But that's the level of status you have to have in the TV industry to point out the bleeding obvious.
And then he got in a fight with his producer, didn't he?
This was after that. So I definitely made sure I brought him the right dinner. There you go. I promised I wouldn't crack gags too early because I'm doing the
no, but hang on, but that would imply that I've told you not to, and I haven't done.
No. I love this show, and I want to, have these chats, but it's some pathetic thing from childhood where I need to puncture every moment with.
You're a comedian.
Yeah.
So, and I love you. I think I've been watching you for years, and you're one of the best there is on TV. And I was just going to say, you just met my whole family. You had a bit of a baptism of fire here.
Yes, that was. I don't know, was that choreographed to sort of put the reducers on me? But yeah, your dad, your stepmom, right, and your sister, your wife, and your dog.
Yeah, that's mad.
And you got one of those dogs in a bag, but
I'm
not going to. Well, I am going to judge. It was disgraceful.
Yeah, it's a bit much, isn't it? Sort of lap dog, and
it's quite liberal elite, I would say.
It is, yeah. Well, I was about to make you a tea, and that was even more liberal elite.
Yeah, I mean that was disgraceful when you said, "How do you make a cup of tea?" That is, yeah. I mean, I still don't know how to react to that.
And I didn't know what to say because I looked in the little fridge, and it's not actually it's not me that's but we've only got. It was like soy or whatever.
Yeah. No, you're an intellectual. Why would you bother with knowing how to make tea?
Yeah, but I made no qualms about it. I think maybe that is my thing. I do sort of have effects that are kind of liberal elite, but they're not my views.
Yeah, look, I might be probably non-binary. I'm sort of a splinter cell working behind enemy lines, according to a lot of people. Maybe there's some truth in it,
Well, this is it. For those who don't know, I mean, you're a comedian. Mm-hmm. You are often known as the one kind of conservative comedian that's allowed on the BBC. Is that right? There's that German guy who's great as well.
Henning Wehn.
He's really good. Is he?
Yeah. I would say. I mean, I can't speak for Henning, but certainly the way that some of his views presents would appear to be at least small c conservative. Yeah. There's Simon Evans as well.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
If you look at something like the News Quiz, they have Andrew Doyle. Andrew is politically left wing, maybe culturally a bit more conservative. So I'm not the only one, but I wouldn't push back on the idea that I've been lucky to get a fair bit of exposure through that means.
How did that sort of happen?
So I started talking about my politics in 2013. There've been a few accounts of my career that have said that I just saw the Brexit thing and then jumped into it because in a sort of cynical way. I was cynical long before that. It was actually 2013, and my wife. I was doing the Leicester Comedy Festival, and I said to my wife, because I was a very club comic then, which I love, by the way, and still love. Club comedy is a great scene. But I was like, I feel like I've got to do something more, challenge myself. And she said, well, you voted Conservative. That was a bit weird for your lot. And I was like, yeah, I suppose it is. So I did 10 minutes at that show about having is that a secret
I
cameraman?
don't know what that was. Yeah, the secret
hiding
cameraman.
in the cupboards.
They won't have heard that on the microphone, but there was a noise back there, and I
Yeah.
think it was probably to do with me trying to put the kettle
It's
on.
somebody from the BBC just checking what I'm saying, as per my contract.
Yeah.
But I went and I did 10 minutes at a Leicester Comedy Festival, and it was exciting. You know, it was a completely new thing. It was I felt unpopular in the room. Just saying that I voted Conservative. I'll be honest, I don't think I had very good material on it. I didn't. The only joke I had that really stood the test of time was I vote Conservative, but I'm not a Tory. I'm a cunt, but with a small c. Which now some on the right might be annoyed at that because it's sort of self-deprecating, but I still think at least it was a decent joke. It had a good structure, and that got nominated for best new show at Leicester. And I just sort of thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And then the then commissioner of Radio 4 said, "Where are all the right-wing comics?" And I was like, this was after, by the way, whereas a lot of people thought it happened before, and I'd just done it because she'd said that. And then so I spent a couple of years just talking about that kind of stuff. Did a couple of Edinburgh shows. No one was that fussed, really, because it's easy to forget that during the coalition years, the Tories weren't retoxified yet. It was austerity that people didn't like. It was the Bullingdon Club. It was the poshness of it all. So no one really gave a shit. And then Brexit happened, and I voted Leave. I wouldn't put myself down as like a, Brexiteer. I wasn't ideologically committed to it. I was asked a binary question, and I came down on the side of Leave, not by a huge margin, but in the end, that was where I came down. And then everything changed. I think then maybe the BBC and other places were like, hang on.
So did things change in terms of how
I think so, yeah.
being invited to? So is it? Do you feel a little bit like there were, to an extent, you were, I guess, invited as a kind of token?
Yeah. I was the token. Yeah.
Providing that the butt of the joke was sometimes Conservatives themselves. Like, hey, I'm a Conservative, but we can all laugh at. Like, if the butt of the joke had been lefties, or maybe you'll tell me it often was, would that have been more difficult?
No, it was definitely a mix. If you think about the MASH report, so I did that show in 2016 at the Edinburgh Fringe, and that was the first one I had that was critically well received, and typically the Edinburgh Fringe, it was the least funny show I've ever done. Right. But it's a really hard thing for people to understand. But the Edinburgh Fringe, the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, laughs aren't the biggest thing.
What?
Well, genuinely, like it's not. If they see somebody making. If anything, it makes them slightly suspicious if you get laughs for a full hour. But, somebody doing something challenging and creating a bit of tension in the room, and they fucking love all that.
Stuart Lee going like that for an hour.
Yeah, that
By the way, I like Stuart Lee, but I did get annoyed because there was one bit where for half an hour he was going...
Oh yeah, I think he lied down as well, like the long pauses. I mean, it's a great gig being Stuart Lee, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can sort of like you like if you can get your pauses right,
yeah,
you can stretch it out and you can say it's all the character of Stuart Lee. It's just, I mean, and he gets to take the piss out of his own audience. He's basically cracked the code, but yeah, I thought the first week of doing that show, I was thinking of going home because I was like, this just isn't funny enough. Really? And then I got a couple of reviews saying, "Oh, you can feel the tension in the air." So I don't want tension; I want laughter. But that's the way the critical community works.
And so that's a kind of. People know the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, but there's comedy. It's very sort of lefty and intellectual, isn't it?
Yeah. It was quite political then. It was not political at all recently. But
well, they didn't allow two. Am I right in saying two Jewish comedians to even appear?
Yeah, the last festival was disgraceful.
That's
I say, let's be specific. It was one venue where there was staff that pushed back. There was a period where the staff pushback was happening. I think there's one comic who's I don't have his permission to name it, but a good comic that appears on BBC stuff. The staff tried to get him cancelled. There's one that people will know about it with Jerry Sadovich, where there was staff at the Pleasance.
Was that him was he getting his woolly?
Yeah, I mean, doing all sorts of terrible stuff. But he's been doing that a long time. Like Jerry Sadovich, that's the act.
Yeah,
is that he says and does the worst things, and the audience had paid. The worst thing I thought was not the worst thing, but one of the terrible things was they just sort of cancelled it. Like there were there was I prioritise the audience, and I thought it was disgusting that like they were just like, right, this performance has been cancelled. We have decided, we have passed it down to you that you cannot absorb this or you can't perceive irony, and that was a pretty dismal moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, then 2017 rolled around. I did Question Time. I did MASH Report that year, and yeah, certainly the first couple of appearances on MASH Report, I was maybe a little bit self-flagellating. Well, I wasn't self-flagellating. I was was just sort of doing stuff that was from my act. So I was saying things about the NHS that were, especially brutal. And then people were kind of going, oh, he's ironically showing what a terrible human he is.
Oh, well, they thought you were like a character doing it on purpose.
Yeah, well, the thing about that show was everyone was cranking it up to 11, but because there was somebody of the right that was on that show that was getting laughs from a studio audience in London, they had to post-rationalise it. And so, it's a character. I used to get that all the time. At the end
like
of
Al
Fringe.
Murray, the bar guy.
I think they thought that, and I thought, well, yeah, character, but with the same name, clothes, and opinion. So as far as that is a character. I mean, like all comedy, you're taking one part of you and dialing it up to 11, right? Doesn't mean it's not true. It means that you might have a passing thought, which is a bit extreme, but you did think it at least once, and you think, well, I'll say that again in front of an audience. It might be funny.
That's interesting. Because I often hear, and I wondered exactly about that. It's the first time I've heard it said that way, because I think a lot of comedians sometimes do hide behind this. It's a character. And it is, like you say, but it's also, I mean, so Gervais often says that. I love Gervais. I think he sometimes watches this show as well. He follows and all of those things. But he will say, like, oh, guys, it's a character. And I think, well, yeah, but it's all, those are your views
No,
to an extent.
I do think that with comedians, perhaps there was a criticism from the left, which I think lands, is that, especially within the Rogan era and comedians having quite a lot of cultural sway, is that, we're comedians until people like our opinions, then we sort of luxuriate in the glory of being thought leaders. Until we get told off, then we're comedians again. So I do think it probably lands as a criticism that maybe we've wanted our cake and eaten it as well. But then, with the MASH report, and it's funny because that show as a rep, like it was almost like a standard bearer for like the anger from the right at that time. And it did skew very left, but it's also true to say that it's still the first and only show, I think, on television that created a regular space for somebody right of centre. And as it went on, and perhaps maybe I got a bit more confident in it, I went for it. And the producer of that, who was like, your kind of metropolitan liberal elite type guy, he equally was pushing me to go further.
It's there's so much going through my mind about that, because I'm going, okay, but is he just doing that so that he can keep with the left, all the lefties? I mean, we don't know yet when this is actually going to go out, this episode now, but we've just had this Tim Davies step down, and the accusations at the BBC of left-wing bias, like total left-wing bias. I don't know what to do about that, because all the lefties think that it's got a right-wing bias.
Yeah.
But I suppose one way to look at it is, we were talking about this just before the show, another comedian was saying about, it's 98% of the comedians are left wing, and then there's just you who's not. So is that, I mean, would you say it's captured?
Oh, well, one thing I would say is that there's almost no topical comedy on any television now. People might not have noticed, because a while ago, there was far too many shows all coming from the same point of view, right? There was like MASH Report, there was, there's Last Leg, Have I Got News for You,
Mock the Week,
8 out of 10, and when it had a topical version. And yeah, I think it's a fair criticism to say that there was the opinion pool there was quite narrow in some respects. But I mean, I would say I went on 8 out of 10 Cats in its last ever topical series. I did a joke about sort of gender, sort of, and they kept it in the edit and stuff like that. So what I think there was an awareness, perhaps, in perhaps more senior staff of what needed to change. The problem is like a lot of BBC stuff gets made, especially the comedy stuff, by production houses. You get to the point of like a producer and AP, their loyalty to the BBC and impartiality is nothing. What they've got a way of seeing the world, and they probably are what, to a large degree, people would see as liberal elite. So that, they don't, why do I give a fuck about representing a right-wing voice or somebody who voted Leave? So my experiences with the BBC, I mean, I can talk like Tim Davies. I've sat in rooms with him, with meetings with him. I think the right seem quite happy that he's gone. I would be careful what you wish for, though, because I got the sense from him. And, people call me, like, BBC shill, paid to say this. They can think what they want, but I sat in a room with him, and I think he really got it. He got the need to have a broader range of voices, a broader range of class. I really think that. But, like, one person getting that and being able to enact that in an organisation that big is another challenge altogether.
What I've heard similar things to what you're saying, that he actually, despite apparently quite a few mess ups, let's say, on his watch, was quite understanding of the fact that the BBC had moved too far to the left.
Yeah, well, I mean, didn't he run to be a Tory councillor?
I think so. I think he might have Tory views. Would check that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, you could still be a fairly, socially liberal, conservative, which I would class myself as, but socially liberal in the way before it went a bit you know, bit
Yeah.
but yeah, he certainly gave me the vibe, and you know, the meetings I had when I was on the diversity panel, and I just, you know, I was on the diversity panel, which was kind of an
That is
interesting
funny.
thing in itself. Yeah, it was funny. I think looking back,
What was that? What is a
it was
diversity?
class. I was there to represent working class, and you know, before anybody comes at me, I do live in a townhouse in Cambridgeshire now. I wish I lived in central Cambridge, but it was really funny that day because it broke like when they asked me to be on the diversity panel, I genuinely, and this is how naive I was, I thought it'll be a one-off chat, you know, I'll just swing by. I was already in London that day, and I thought I'll just go along, say a few words, you know, it might be good for the old, you know, networking, totally self-interested, right?
Sure, we'd all do that.
Yeah, and then like on the day that I was going for that thing, I went and walked the dog at 6 a.m. and like I was trending like super early in the morning because the press release had gone out. And all the newspapers have made a big fuss, and they'd all taken it in different ways. So it was like, I think the Guardian was like Tory on the diversity panel, like as though that's a protected characteristic. I think the Telegraph were like white man, like representing whiteness, or something, which is a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
you know, there's a lot of us.
a lot of us.
And yeah, he actually said on the press release that I was there to talk about class, but they all seemed to
Just ignore it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it certainly got. So I was completely freaked out by that. I arrived at this diversity meeting, not used to that level of scrutiny. I'm not very good in you know, like in the eye of a storm, stuff like that. It really freaks me out.
What happens to you?
I get like palpitations. I get
Do you?
like, yeah, my body goes all tense and stuff like that. And I can't focus on my life. That's what bothers me. Is like I've got a wife and a son, and I can't just be what I want to be around them. I'm just thinking, just check again, just check the internet again. It happened again after that Politics Live appearance, which ended up with Laurence Fox getting cancelled. That was like another thing where I was standing next. I wasn't like in the void, but I was standing very fucking close to it. And yeah, so I was on that diversity panel, and it was interesting. That was before Tim Davie was the DG, and yeah, it was interesting. It was supposed to be that because they'd had like race, sex, disability, and sexuality, and it took I don't know how many panels before somebody went maybe class. You know, if you're looking at things that could potentially hold somebody back in their life, like I would have thought that should have happened earlier, personally, but. So I went in there and it was great. And all the people who represented the different groups, they were really supportive of it. Like, yeah, this is meant to be. And, you know, I did agree to like Chatham House rules when I was on it. So I'm not going to say exactly who, but like there was certainly one person in there where it wasn't against me being there, but I certainly got a sense that was not the priority. The BBC is such a news-led organisation. You know, the higher ups there.
Oh, so being a comedian, you mean you weren't?
Yeah, in class, I just think that particular person perhaps came from a different tradition. But the moment Tim Davie come in, it was very different and in a positive way.
That's good. Do you know my DEI story? Like
origin. Roughly, yeah.
It's just white man kind of thing. But so there was like 5 years of every single production company at one point in the meeting. Yes, we'd love your ideas, but you're going to have to be off screen now. While we put a minority on screen. So the joke then was they always made the same jokes, these production guys, because they knew it was ridiculous as well. Like everyone knows it's ridiculous, or at least a lot of people think so. So the jokes would always be like, you know, are you sure you're not gay? We can't entice you. You know, then you're a minority. Or sometimes we could break your legs for you if you want. But nobody ever said to me, are you sure you don't have some sort of working class? Maybe that's about me, or maybe it's because of what you said.
It's hard. I mean, look, one thing I am sympathetic to with the BBC and any organisation trying to get to grips with class is how do you assess it? You know, like if I look at you, I can tell you're definitely a man. You know, I can say these days, right? And I could tell, you know, you can tell me you're straight or gay. You know, if you're disabled, some of that is visible. You know, if you're black, that's visible. But class is a hard one to define. No one's really come up with an absolute metric.
Yeah, it's surprising though that nobody said to me, "Are you sure?" Nobody asked. Like, I guess.
It might be in your voice, mate.
It might be my voice.
I would say.
But even in the jokes about we can break your legs, like, are you sure you don't have a different accent? Because I did have a different accent growing up, just because a bit of a Charmeleon kind of way. If I was with friends who were more sort of football lads and all that, I would go a little bit more like that way. And then if I was back at my posh school, I'd be a bit more, you know, like that. So I could have put on the accent or whatever.
I would love to hear it right now.
Yeah, I was doing it for a bit. That's how I used to be. Look, I remember, and this is the funny thing about class. I remember like being must have been about 8, and my dad would take me to Tottenham games back when people could afford to go to those games. But we used to go to the Tottenham, and then my brother started coming as well when he was like 5, so I was 8, and so they couldn't get 3 seats together. So dad and brother, and then I was like 8 seats down was the only place they could find a seat for me. So my dad took me over the first time, and he said to the guys around, because you're going to be next to them all year, it's a season ticket we had, and it's just these fellas, and my dad sort of left me. Then he sort of said, "Oh, this is Andrew, he's just going to be sitting there," and then he went off, and I remember looking up, and I just said to these guys, I was like, "All right, lads, how's it going? How you do? Yeah, big game today, innit?"
Yeah.
As an 8-year-old, I had the croaky voice as well, and the problem was then I had to keep that up for like 10 years. I was next to these guys, so for 10 years, and my dad would be like, "Andrew, do you want any sort of salmon bagels?" And I'd be like, "What's that, Dad?"
You were identifying as working class. You were appropriated.
I culturally appropriated.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird for me with diversity because, as I'm sure some of my critics would say, is without it, I wouldn't have a career, right? I always thought it was a very strong live comic, but there certainly came a point in the 2010s where, if you looked at any production company's shopping list, as you well know, straight white middle-aged man wasn't high up the list. Wasn't, they were. That's not to say there weren't loads still getting loads of exposure, but the point was about, where was new talent being found from, and it tended not to becoming less from that pool. But yeah, politics, it's no doubt, like there was a lot of the career I have now is because of me talking about the radical act of having voted in line with a lot of people. I mean, I remember like after Brexit, it was definitely a shot across the bows for, the kind of cultural establishment, because I think everyone always understood that comedies are lefties. That was how the alternative scene started. Right, understood.
But not back in the day though, like Jim Davis.
Oh yeah, no. If you go back to the 70s and the guys that played charity golf, yeah, that was.
So when did that happen?
I guess when the alternative era at the end, mid to late 80s, Rick Mail, people like that, when it kind of won that particular culture war, and then it was just an inherited thing that no one questioned for a long time. But then all jokes kind of wear thin after a while. The Tories had been in a while. Topical comedy seemed to be coming largely from the same place to a lot of people. But then Brexit happened, and I think the problem with Brexit was everyone had always gone, right, we get that the comics go left, but we knew that, about a third of left-wing people have voted leave, and yet in the world of comedy, it was almost no one. And then you kind of go, hang on, it's like Marmite, you either love it or you hate it. Whereas the comedy world apparently all hated Marmite, like almost all of them. And so I had meetings, and this is the thing is that there are smart people, in these corporations that are like, this can't carry on. But I just wonder if maybe those conversations came a bit late, because by then a lot of people had already migrated away from terrestrial comedy because there was competitors, there was YouTube, Netflix specials. People wanted like the kind of edge and bite that comedy used to have. And I think if you look, from the beginning of the 2010s to where, certainly even by the end, actually, the drop off in people getting their comedy from terrestrial outlets had fallen off a cliff.
Well, the same. I guess the same point you make about if it wasn't for this, you might not have your position and your job. Yeah. I wouldn't probably have this channel, because people would be able to get this material on the BBC. Why would they come to YouTube?
Yeah, exactly. It was. Comedy became risk averse in the 2010s. It really did, at the worst possible time. I mean, I remember one of the Edinburgh Comedy Awards that year, that one of the Comedy Award organisers spoke about one of the winners sort of setting the trend and this new generation of comics of what you can't say in comedy. And I don't know about you, but I would have always thought comedy is more about what you can say. If there's one license that comedians have, is to say the unsayable. That's not all comedy is, by the way. Some people have characterised it as you're always upsetting and offending people. That's not really the objective either. But that you should, you like, just like the jester would say stuff to the king that no one else could. Maybe that's what we get to do. I mean, it should be said that the jester sometimes did get killed. For overstepping the mark, so it's not totally secure.
Do you think did that actually happen? Because I've heard, is that,
well, it just takes some thin-skinned king, doesn't it? To thin-skinned king, like you get short kings now. And anyway, see, this is me getting frivolous. Let's stay with the subject, Geoff. That's how my mind works. But yeah, it became risk averse. I mean, I think if you look at a show like Mock the Week, right, like a lot of comics were like, oh, I'm not sure about that show. It's a bit adversarial. It's a bit gladiatorial. That's when the public loved it.
Yeah.
When Frankie wasn't holding back, strong comics on there, Russell Howard, like a great lineup every week. And I think that, comedy is such an instinctive thing. People don't really process it. They've laughed before they've thought about it usually. And so if you don't tickle that funny bone, people will just go elsewhere. And they did. And comedy, yeah, it was just a tragic story, really, was that comedy, I think it has got its bollocks back a little bit now, but in the 2010s, it lost its balls, comedy.
Have you got examples? I don't want to put you on a spot because it's quite hard to think of maybe a joke you may have written where either you went, you know what, this would do really well, but I'm not going to be able to say that.
Do you know what? It's hard to think of specifics. I think that the truth is I'm not an edgelord anyway, so mostly things that I would say would be okay, because I'm not. I wish I was like an out and out edgelord, someone like Ricky or someone like that, but I'm not quite. I'm too scared of upsetting people maybe sometimes. But
getting those heart palpitations.
But no, the truth is it's not nice upsetting people. That's the truth of it. Is that you have to go into bat for what you think, but that outcome is never a fun outcome. But I certainly think maybe around 2020 during the Great Awakening, there was a lot of talk of comics of, people were genuinely worried. There'd been enough people that got in trouble for things that if the truth is I probably did self-censor during that period, and that it's not something I'm proud of, but you could just see what was happening around you. I think now is a much healthier time in a way, and I think that what's happened with comedy is that there is a different community. There's Comedy Unleashed, there's people on the right, there's people on the sort of like contrarian side of comedy, there's podcasts, there's shows, So in the end, it corrected, but it's at the expense of, I guess, the old bastions of terrestrial television, and not so much radio. I think like News Quiz, I think probably deserves credit for having regular voices like myself on. I think it makes it better as well, because if you get like kind of four people roughly of the same opinion all agreeing, it's not great radio, is it?
No, that's true.
But if I say something, if I'm on there and then the lefty comic snaps back at me, great. That makes their joke have higher stakes and mine. I think everybody wins.
Have you ever had it where it gets a bit awkward and there's a bit of a fallout?
Yeah. I'll say something. There was a recent record of something. I can't remember what it was. But I sort of pointed out, like when Doge was shutting stuff down, I was sort of talking about the fact that, the US, what the US debt is, and how much it was likely to get to and what that equated to per person. Maybe the problem is I didn't make a joke, but I did say that, at some point it shouldn't be a surprise that someone said, maybe we need to work on this debt. And it was kind of like no one in the room wanted to hear it at that point.
What were you on? What was this?
I think it was on News Quiz, actually.
Okay.
But if I'd have made a good joke, I don't know, but I just sort of made a point.
Who kicked off at you?
And no one kicked off. It just was really awkward.
Oh, just silence.
Yeah, just I got nothing. But it wasn't, like I say, it wasn't really a joke. It was a point. And that was me basically maybe betraying my own rules. Is I don't like this thing of comedy just kind of, the clapter thing of like you make a big grandstanding moral point. You go, well then do something else then. Like comedy, I've always thought it's an exchange system whereby the laugh is a token that you give to earn the right to say what you think. Because otherwise, if you take away the laugh, like why the hell would somebody care what a comedian thinks?
Did you, as a kid, did you like making people laugh?
Yeah. It started very early. I was my first ever gig in inverted commas was we were in the Isle of Wight, and it was quite a tricky family holiday, and they had a thing called a best cowboy competition, which already sounds like a noncy fucking ruse. Where some dodgy like blue coat had gone, let's get all the little boys in Stetsons. But it was a weird thing, but so I remember waiting backstage and all the other boys were a bit older and they were going out there confidently with their holsters on and their Stetsons, and they were sort of aping American language, and they say, my name's Brad and I come from Texas, and these kind of things. And I just sort of missed the point a little bit, and I went out and I said, my name's Jeffrey and I come from Essex, because I thought Essex, Texas, I got confused between the two.
Oh, right.
And I just remember this noise, like this laughter. And I remember like...
It was an accidental laugh. That was your first
laugh. Definitely. Like I think laughing... it's about people laughing with you or at you.
Yeah.
I think I started off with people laughing at me.
And it continued.
It continued. It continued. But I remember feeling like at that point that something was right. I'd made something better. And it was like putting out a fire. The only problem was, and I learned this after my very first solo stand-up gig, was that I woke up next day and the fire was burning again. But I was like, the first time I did a solo stand-up gig and it went well, I was like, that's it, I've resolved everything.
And then
And
you need it back. Is it just a need to be liked? Do you think? Is there some kind of
yes, yeah, definitely.
which I see in myself, and that's why we do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I hate it, in a way about myself. I am a pleaser, really. And I suppose where I sit in comedy is somebody that's trying to bridge the lines. I'm not trying to cultivate an audience in an echo chamber or just in a specific group. I don't really want all right-wingers coming to see me. I don't want all lefties either. I always think, truthfully, diversity in a comedy audience does tend to make for a better reaction. Diversity by age is a great one as well. I get on this tour, get loads of like dads and mums coming with their kids, like they're 18, which is unbelievable. It's like the greatest compliment. But there is a part of me that does also think like maybe I'm the one comic they can both tolerate. Like neither of them actually like me that much, but neither of them hate me.
7 out of 10 for everyone.
Yeah, like so the kid might say, "Oh, we're going to see this funky kind of like comic with dyed hair," and the dad's like, "Fuck that," and then he's like, "Oh, let's go and see an old school comic." The kid's going, "I wouldn't be seen dead at that." So maybe I'm the compromise comic.
In the Michael McIntyre space, but I think people really
Yeah.
love you
I don't
and
know. I mean,
Michael
Michael McIntyre, I just rate incredibly high.
families can go to see him.
Yeah, but I just think like in terms of
He's hysterical.
funny bones, I've never seen anything like it.
He went to my school.
Yeah, I mean, was
15
he
years
noticing
before.
stuff back then as well?
He was 15 years older than me.
Yeah,
so I
going
didn't-
around the canteen going, "Yeah, the news is." Yeah.
It must have been like-
it's just like the moment he starts talking, I start laughing. I mean, I love good comedy, and I love the guys that can. If you can play an arena, with maybe a couple of exceptions, if you can play an arena, you're good at it. Like if you can get that many people to buy tickets, you're doing
it's
something
nuts.
right. Yeah,
It's nuts. What did happen with that Ava Santina when you were on that
Politics
show?
Live. Yeah, so I was on there in autumn 2023. And I was promoting my book, and the book was quite a light-hearted book about masculine. Well, it was more specific. It was called The British Bloke Decoded, and it had some serious bits in it about relationships and how men sometimes lack the emotional language to deal with when things are going wrong, or how to articulate what they're not getting from relationships. But it also had silly stuff as well about why men don't use sunscreen and stuff like that. And I went on there, and they were sort of talking about, should there be a minister for men? And I was like, I wasn't sure at that point. But I said, well, there are life outcomes for men that are demonstrably worse. And I mentioned the fact that men were more likely to die during the pandemic, which I still think is a weird thing, like significantly more likely to die. We heard about other sort of ethnic groups. We heard about, even probably not enough, but about people with disability. But we didn't hear about that simple difference in sex. And then,
Do we know why that is?
well, I suppose men, habitually their behaviours, they tend to be, I think, more obese. I think that they tend to have substance abuse problems,
More risk taking as well.
Yeah.
So you'd
There's
go
a
out.
myriad of reasons, but the point, I suppose, is like, if that was anyone else, you'd say, well, why is society making them like that? And the point I made was, whereas when it's men, it's why do they do it to themselves? It's a fundamental difference in the way that we see, problems that men have. And she pushed back on a couple of things. And I kind of like, I was a bit, if people want to watch it, it's on YouTube still. I was just sort of confused as to what was happening. I thought what I said was fairly straightforward, and Ava, I know what Ava was doing. Look, by the way, we spoke. The weird thing was, I tweeted straight afterwards, and I said, I think it was a still of my face saying, when you think you're making a simple point, but everyone's arguing with you. And she said, no, you were. And she sort of not backed down, but she sort of said, look, maybe I got that wrong. And we sort of, within like an hour or two, we'd resolved to speak further and have a constructive discussion. And
She's quite reasonable, actually.
Yeah, she is. Yeah. She is. And we spoke straight afterwards, and she kind of made that point. And then what I thought was odd, because that moment started to go viral quite quickly after that, was on the other side, the former head of the TUC, she kind of like, Ava got all the stick. And so Ava did get stick, by the way. People shouting at, she kind of went through it a bit after that. But it was weird that she got all of it, because from the other side, basically, I can't remember the lady's name, the former head of the TUC, she said to me, she started off by saying, basically some of my best friends are male, which seemed to be her point. I was like, is this really happening?
Yeah.
and then she said, well, why don't you, this is genuinely what she said. She said, why don't you start an organisation called Blokes Against Sexual Harassment? And I was like, it's live telly, you got to remember. And this is before things have redressed a little bit. So I'm trying to process. I'm like, well, of course that's like a bad thing. Like, who wouldn't think that was bad? But I was also thinking, well, the acronym of Blokes Against Sexual Harassment would be BASH.
Bash.
It'll be Bash. Like, what? I mean, just like, is she? So I'm in this surreal space thinking, is she taking the piss? Like, I didn't know what her objective was. And
She might not have thought through Bash.
no, and I do think. No, I definitely don't think. Look, if she had and she still said that, then that is like mental. But I kind of like come off of that, and it was almost. I mean, maybe I felt like belittled a little bit, and I do think even in the 2 years since then, talking about male issues has moved on dramatically. But there were some dinosaurish views. How men used to get called dinosaurs for being a bit, oh, you little lady, why don't you go and do some charity work?
Yeah.
It was almost like that, what she said to me. Oh, you're with your, oh, bless, maybe instead you could do this, like suggesting to me how I'd spend my time. I'd worked with her a couple of other times. She's a perfectly nice enough lady. But that moment was just a really bizarre moment. And then so I was like, just walked back to Victoria Station thinking, I wonder if anybody else thought that. And then suddenly it was going mad, like social media going like,
But more Ava.
well, not yeah, to a degree, but like there were like quite a lot of people saying, I normally hate Geoff Norcott, but he actually had a point here, and it should be possible for men to talk. Men are more likely to be homeless, substance abuse, deaths of despair. Like the list goes on and on. Like there's a huge list of life outcomes that are worse for men, and that's never to take away from the issues that we need to address with women. But the fact I always need to caveat that is sort of suggests part of the discourse landscape. And so then I got loads of people contacting me, through emails and DMs and stuff like. And a lot of them were mothers, like there are a lot of women very active in the area of male mental health, because they have like sons, uncles, brothers, like husbands.
It changes
that they're worried about, and women are, I think it is true to say, more emotionally active in a caring way.
I even see it in my wife. Like the older women, I guess she started to see me as almost like mentally incapacitated. I don't know, but because we met 12 years ago, so we were young. And now we're old, or somewhere in between. And you've seen that difference where she's become a lot more empathetic towards issues for men. Whereas when you're a young woman, you're just told these horrible blokes,
Yeah. I think that there's plenty of people, who can see that now, and ever more so, and are glad that it's being spoken up about. There was a couple of days of that, and then Laurence Fox, that whole thing with GB News.
Yeah, what was that again?
Where he made those comments. So I think it was him and Dan Wootton were having they were talking about the clip.
Oh, they said I wouldn't shag that.
Yeah, like, look, call me old-fashioned gentleman. Like, it's just poor, like.
No, it wasn't on.
No, and I was like, I woke up, saw this all kicking off because it happened the previous night, and I was like, that's, I was just gutted. Basically, I was gutted it ended up like that, because that then became the story, and Ava was getting a lot of heat. It ended up in a lot of people losing jobs and all that sort of stuff. But there was a brief period, like of 48 hours, where there was a discussion happening. And that was kind of frustrating in a way.
That's like when you're having, like when you're a kid, you're having an argument with your mum and you're trying to be subtle and nuanced about it, and then your brother comes in to help you, but is not as subtle and makes it quite
because
angry.
Then it became about them, and it wasn't about like, can we start talking about the difficulties in articulating problems that men are having.
Did you speak to Laurence? Do you know Laurence?
No, not really. He came on my podcast once.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think he would, because I think he said at the time because I think part of it was the shag bit that people were upset with. Although it did come out that I think Ava, and I do apologise to her if I'm wrong, I think she had said something similar in objectifying a man some years before. If not, I do apologise to her. I think that came out that she had also said a thing like Laurence had said about men objectifying in the same manner.
Yeah.
So I think Laurence, the shag bit's one bit. I think a lot of people were upset with that because it was so dehumanizing. And I think he said he means that as in somebody who held those views, not Ava themselves. Just to give Laurence a side.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the pushback at it was, and I saw a lot of people on the right that were equally, just said that's not okay. So I don't think it was a case necessarily of just an especially woke reaction. I do think you've got to have, in the way that you talk about colleagues and people in public life, there's there are sort of standards that we should try and adhere to. But like I say, that's to one side. What I was just like, right, we were having a discussion, like that clip was being looked at and people were analysing what came out of that. But then it's interesting how things go. I just sort of what a lot of people are contacting me saying, and this is going to sound a little bit David Brent. I'm like, oh, you should do more of this. But they were sort of saying that somebody that looks and sounds like you, which I was like, no offense, but like you should do more in this area. So since then, that 2 years, we did a charity event. I've been for a coalition for men and boys who are relaunching. I don't know when this is going to go out, but I'm going to be an ambassador for their new charity. And I've, done a keynote thing at the Men's Sheds organisation. And so I've just sort of stayed in that world talking about men's mental health. And I'm not alone. It's become a more common thing. But it's mad to think that, even 2 years ago, part of the reason that was a viral moment was because it was a bit like...
Yeah,
people are talking. The men are getting a bit chippy, aren't they?
I wondered, and what do you feel about this then? And it's something I've only started thinking about recently, really, because I feel politically maybe quite similar to what you might be, or this view and that view, and I'm on this side and that, but I understand the nuances. Maybe a liberal in the 90s, I was maybe.
That's me. Yeah.
So individual liberty, and every woman should have the same rights, the same men,
live and let
all those
live.
things.
Yeah.
But what if we have incentivized through our culture, men and women to do roles that evolutionarily didn't suit us necessarily. So feminism is what I'm saying. Men are very, have all the problems you've just mentioned. Women, I think, are less happy when they're asked about how happy they are than they were in the 1960s.
Yeah, surveys about that. Yeah.
And so it's a really hard one for us to
navigate. This is where maybe I'll sound a bit woo-woo, but I think that our understanding of... So people say that gender is a construct, or certainly that was said for a while. But I think that I've always thought that those characteristics, whether it's women being more empathetic, men being more competitive, I thought that they were a consequence of biological sex. So they weren't just a characteristic that we assumed because we saw some films that said us to do that. They're somewhere in us, right?
Yeah.
Which is very old-fashioned, possibly controversial or something.
I think that's what I think.
Yeah, but here's where it comes down to me. I ain't a scientist. I'm not going to play I'm just a comedian, Carl. I should commit to this. I think if a salmon knows to swim back up a fucking stream...
I just realised you said scientist. I thought you said Zionist. And I was like, where's this salmon going?
That is not my wheelhouse.
From the river to the sea. Salmon will be free.
See, now you're doing the jokes. I'm trying to do the proper discourse thing.
See, I would have tried to be a comedian because I think I have that same kind of
joke.
Needing people to like me, or that. But I said this to Francis Foster, our friend, as well. I go, how the fuck you guys get up there and say something that's supposed to be funny, and they might not laugh, But that's a sidetrack. Sorry, go on about the salmon to the river to the sea.
Yeah, so the salmon somehow knows to do this. It doesn't know it in a linguistic form. It hasn't been passed down to it. It hasn't watched loads of films that were indoctrinating it into salmon roles. Yeah. It just knows that this is what we do as salmon. So I do wonder if in the fullness of time we'll discover more about ourselves and our brains and how we're wired, and it might be interesting the impact that it has, and it, it's just something I definitely saw through teaching. I think with teenage boys is to kind of, God, that's going to sound a bit fucking Hugh Edwards, but I was going to say to meet them where they're at. No.
Well, he literally did that, but you mean it in a figurative sense.
Yeah, figurative sense. Like, what are you? How can I work with what you are? And that is a very small C conservative way of seeing the world. Is what is the world? Not forget how I wish it to be. This is what makes me a conservative more than anything. It's that pragmatic, what is the world, rather than the utopian view of it.
That's it, and that is the difference between left and right.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that way, you are a conservative in some ways, I think. And I actually think, weirdly, that's why stand-ups are all a bit conservative coded, to use a long word, because that is what stand-up is supposed to do. It's like, forget all the bullshit on the niceties. This is what's really going on. So I always kind of could see that teenage boys were motivated by different feelings. But when I was in teaching, schools had become, for want of a better word, like quite a feminized kind of space, right? Part of this is the problem is a lot of men don't want to teach. So men are part of this problem. But I remember one lad when I was a teacher, I was off doing a course for like 3 days. Really good lad, being brought up by a single dad who was a top bloke. And I come back and he was suspended. And I was like, why is he suspended? And they were like, well, because he hit a kid. And I was like, okay, that's bad. And then so the dad come up to school and I had to kind of explain it to him, and he was like, "Would you know the context?" And the context was this other kid was kept like squirting him with Ribena, and he kept doing it. And this lad had said, "Don't stop doing that." Gave him several warnings, and then finally said, "If you do that again, I'm going to punch you." Right? And then so the kid did it again, and he punched him. And so as a blokey bloke, I'm sitting there going, "Problem? I don't see that's what my mum would have called the law of the playground. Playground politics." But the school I was at that time, it's very much like there's never an excuse for violence. I was like, you probably shouldn't do it, but like, let's be real here. But what really got me was the fact that he got suspended, but the other kid, nothing happened to him. So yeah, that was another reason where perhaps I realised teaching as a whole made me realise that I was a bit more conservative.
That's really interesting because you've just described Israel-Palestine in the most amazing analogy. Ribena punch.
This is how I work. I'm working on several levels at one time, but then all of being a teacher made me more conservative actually. And it's weird because it's seen as such a left-wing profession, but the moment I went in there, I was like, oh, actually, they don't need me to be their mate. They need me to insist that they call me sir. I need to wear a suit. I hate wearing suits, but I wore a suit. I was relatively smartly dressed most of the time. It was all about discipline for me. There were some schools when I was doing supply where they'd let give the kids loads of power. Sometimes there would be kids on the, like if there was a job interview for a teacher, they'd have kids sitting there as part of the application. I was like, get the fuck, you're an adult. This is your job is to take responsibility, and to make decisions. So weirdly for me, like, I said in my first book, that was part of realising that I was, conservative leaning at least.
That's so interesting.
And also as well, at that time, everyone's got to go to university. I was like, really? Like what? Yeah. That's so arbitrary, that the Blair era to say 50% of kids got to go to university. But then it makes it not special. The moment half of people have got a thing, it's...
So 50% of students, that university students, then have to go and do a PhD to differentiate
themselves.
themselves.
And also, I could see with a lot of lads where you go, these are physical, lads who their skill set is not necessarily in the academic world. And yet, look, in a weird way, fair play to Keir Starmer. I didn't think I was going to say that today. But he actually said in his speech about changing the balance of objectives for kids going to university. But it's been a long time coming.
It's really interesting what you're saying about basically defining left and right as utopia versus reality. I think that's such a nice way of putting it.
I mean, maybe it's not. It must be lovely to sit around thinking that a better way is possible.
Yeah. And we must look
might sleep a bit better.
We must look so evil to them to always be going, no.
Or sad. Because they're maybe going to bed.
They're sad. Like in Venezuela, they're not doing great.
Yeah, so. I mean, look, it's never. I get to see a sort of situation where it's dramatically worked out well, and I was, sometimes you listen to things that just remind you, because like a lot of people on the online right now would see me as a lot of them would think I'm a lefty. I get more stick now off right wingers than off lefties by a massive margin, because I've stayed very still, socially liberal, economically right wing, but as the cultural over to Windows moved, I guess I must seem like
I also get
Rory Stewart to these guys.
I also get stick from the right though as well. To an extent, that's that thing of you almost, if you think of it in a human tribal sense, it's the people in your cult, the people who are closest to you are the ones who are actually a risk, a danger to you, because they can convince other people to move slightly. So like, I don't care about like what Owen Jones says. He's not going to convince any of my followers anything, but maybe Geoff Norcott might, because he's also on the right but has a slightly
there's a danger, when your own turn on you. But this is where I think I do think that the woke right thing does land as an idea, because for me the biggest problem I had with the woke thing was ideological purity. I don't have certainty about many things. So whenever someone presents an absolute point of view, I'm likely to pick holes in it and what it takes to be considered right wing. I mean, at the moment, like if you're economically right wing, no one gives a shit.
No one even knows.
No, well, they don't. It doesn't count.
No one knows my economic views.
Yeah, but the thing, the economic like right wing part of me is the most extreme part of me.
Yeah,
and also the thing that made me radical 10 years ago was exactly that, because I wasn't standing up saying austerity was terrible. I was saying, we need to cut down spending and stuff like that. Whereas now, what's deemed to be right wing is all about the cultural stuff. Whereas listen, man, if it come down to me with tax, I would just get rid of so many taxes. I would, 20% maximum for all. I would get rid of stamp duty. I would trim it right down. Yeah.
We just bought a new house. That stamp duty.
What stamp duty? I mean, it literally is. It's the closest the government get to a mafia shakedown, isn't it? It's literally like some wise guys turn up and they go, "Oh yeah, you had a good bit of good fortune. We want to get our beaks wet." And it's like, because a house is, people might say, well, VAT, absolutely, 20% is still an emergency rate.
Yeah.
That was set 15 years ago, the emergency rate. Anyway, see, this is where I get angry.
So I didn't even know that. I'm a young business.
Oh, mate,
I just thought it was always there.
No, 20%.
Yeah, I know it's 20,
insanely high. It's a fifth.
I didn't know that. I thought
the
it was
government
normal.
are putting when I charge anybody for anything, I say, "Oh, here's a fifth. Fifth of this is going to the government." I don't know exactly what they've done to facilitate this, but
but then I get it back though, so I don't understand.
You do a bit, yeah. Some of it is a bit, odd, but so you can kind of make some arguments for some of that stuff. Whereas stamp duty it's just like, because it's a great life event buying a house, right? It must be an emotional thing for you and your wife, right?
Yeah.
And then these guys come up and they go, "Well, it's a nice house. Be a shame if something happened to it."
Not just that, I also had Professor David Betts, who came on recently, and he thinks there's going to be a civil war in the country. And he told me that I asked after we'd finished filming, I was like, "Look, this is where on the map where we're buying the house." And he was like, "Yeah, they're going to be boarding up around the M25, and you're going to be stuck in the
see, that's the thing, is where I'm at, like all that civil war dystopia stuff. That's not really my kind of wheelhouse, but the financial stuff, that is,
but that's boring compared to
But look, I was poor for a bit of my life, so I can't, in a way, like that is always the big fucking priority.
But it's hard to show that, it's hard to show that in a way that people get angry together. I mean, they do still, obviously, about poverty and all of those things. It's really important. Of course it is.
Yeah.
But immigrants, that just flashes up on the screen faster. I'm not saying it should do, by the way. I'm not saying that's a more worthy cause than I don't want to be misunderstood to have said
that.
No,
but it is emotive in a way. Money's not... Well, I don't know if I fully agree. I think, money is emotive to me. Like I've been doing a thing on my podcast called Piss Take Prices, which is just a fun throwaway thing about those things that have got so expensive. It's not just you go, "Well, that's a bit steep." It makes you gasp. And I think that we are at that point with a lot of things in this country. So I think, weirdly, I've got a weird relationship with the Conservatives. I think I am a conservative, like, if on a DNA sort of level, just about. And I know that there'll be loads of people on the right, they get annoyed, like, "Why aren't you a reform guy?" Because, socially liberal, economically the right wing, there's a version of the Conservative Party which is the closest out of all the parties to what I am. Now, that doesn't mean they will always be the best spokespeople for that, or that they'll be trustworthy guardians of that. But it's almost like that abusive relationship where no matter how often they let me down, if they whisper sweet nothings into my ear about getting rid of tax, maybe I'll go, "All right, you said you're going to change." Yeah.
I make that point as well, because, you support a football team. Football team might get relegated.
Yeah.
They come back up a few years later. There's a new manager. It's a different team now. So because people say, how can you ever trust the Tories again after those years? But it's a different bunch of people.
No, I get it. Look, what, the immigration that happened under them after what they'd pledged. I do think, like, what's incredible about the Tories is, like, the ridiculous years, 900,000, 750 or whatever. They were too high. But there was also, there was Ukraine, there was Hong Kong, there was Afghanistan. Their inability to make that argument was fucking one of the most astonishing failures I've ever seen in British public life. But yeah, like the allowance of, kind of the sort of like woke elements of institutions. There was so much that happened on their watch that was supposed to be the stuff that they were the guardians against. And maybe the biggest disappointment was after 2019 when Boris got in. I was really like, right, whatever issues I had with Boris Johnson and how trustworthy he was, I did feel that government were going to be, they weren't going to look at social media. They weren't going to look at focus groups. They were just going to get on there at an 80 seat. Who will ever have a bigger majority than that again?
Yeah.
And but they didn't. They were just as obsessed.
But also, you say, it's more the economic stuff that's important to you. But then I suppose, and you mentioned immigration briefly there. Immigration apparently has been a net drain on our economy, right? So that's another reason that a lot of people are going, that's why we've got to go with reform.
Well, look, one of the compelling arguments of Brexit was, tradespeople, what happened to their rates of pay when there was competition from Eastern Europe, So that it can be a motivating factor as well. I need a piss so badly. I'm so sorry.
Do you want to rush? Go and rush.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to get to the sort of end.
You were talking faster the last few minutes. So basically, all of what you've just said is a way of saying women should just be in the kitchen.
I can't. For the record, I had a toilet break and I have no idea what we were talking about. The biological stuff They should. I think women should be swimming upstream. I think, or something. That was thing.
I think it's a really hard one because I guess we're both people, and many people watching this will also be the same of like individual liberty, men and women. You know, my daughter, why can't she be a rocket scientist, and all of those things. And at the same time, on a societal level, what if by pushing and pushing and pushing that, we've not only made women extremely unhappy, we've also made men feel worthless and all of those things.
That could be the case. I mean, it's hard because like in terms of sort of measuring happiness, those kind of metrics have only come in recently, so we don't know. What do we know about the 1950s? Well, most of it maybe from Mad Men, but the women were all on sort of Valium, the men were all drinking whiskey, having affairs and dying young. So
That's true.
I don't know if the evidence is there. I want to be factually sure about these things, but I think that
I think women did self-report as happier back then than now.
Okay,
but I think you raise really interesting points. Well, you know, how do you trust self-rating of happiness?
Yeah, mother's ruin, all that sort of stuff with the gin. I do think that but in terms of having, you know, a generation of young men who don't feel that they have purpose or place or value is such a huge problem facing us, you know, and that's something I've really focused on recently, because like if you're worried about the rise of the far right, I am too, you know, because I'm centre right, you know, I'm worried about the rise of far left too, but that rarely gets I don't know how many like it's so weird with the far left is that people, whatever you say, people always think of like fucking John Lennon and, you know, nice stuff, whereas but it is what it is.
Think of Stalin.
Yeah, well, exactly. But, you know, at the moment, maybe it's a more visible risk, I guess. But the net result of that is if you're worried about it, you have to engage with what's happening with and to young men and be sympathetic and think about how things could be better. Like, it's no good just saying, like, this argument of we want boys have got to be better. You got to well, find out why they're not happy first, because all that kind of sounds like is you see them as a utility for you. It sounds like you don't care, right? You got to sound like you care. And that John Lewis advert, like I don't know when this will go out. I mean, it blew me away, that advert. And it just shows how things had moved culturally, where just a dad being portrayed as not a fucking bumbling idiot and whose wife knows everything. You know, the wives are always really shrewd and, you know, just or the dad's falling off of something in the background. Usually that's been the recent trend of adverts. And then a teenage boy who, let's be honest, in the advert looked like he could have been the older brother of the kid in adolescence. You're like at the beginning, you're like, where's this going? Fucking is this a sequel? You know?
Yeah.
And then the fact that like the kid is sensitive and nice. But what I thought I loved about it, and I do realise I'm becoming one of these, but what about the men, guys? But I do look out for this stuff now, and the way that they expressed how men communicate was so well observed, because it's not, men use way less words per day than women, right? Statistically, always been the case.
You surprised me.
So, hey, we've got Christmas coming up. Me and my wife, we observed last Christmas. We estimated how many words each family member used, and I think her and her mum were about 10,000. I was like the highest ranking male at about 2,000. And then I think a lot of the men were around 40 and 60. So
yeah,
it's a different way of communicating. But what that does sometimes for me is the way that men communicate is loaded. There are heavy metaphors. There are meanings put on things. So the exchange of a record saying, I get you, Dad. Like, even now as I'm saying it chokes me up. Because
I can see that. Well, you've got a kid as well.
Yeah, I've got a son. And I just think, like, male friendships, how many films or things have you seen culturally about how male friendships work? There's a film with The Rock in called The Smashing Machine. And at the heart of that, again, quietly revolutionary film, is about a really positive male friendship but also a really toxic relationship with a woman, you know, which I just haven't, like, don't get me wrong, the main character in it isn't any angel, but the woman is a fucking nightmare as well. And to see that articulated in a film, I was like, wow, it's weird. In a way, it's just like my career, you know. I'm not a radical person, but there are certain cultural spaces where it doesn't take a lot to seem radical.
That adolescence, then, I mean, as that happened, that was like 6 months ago. So has the culture changed that from the adolescence? You can draw a line from adolescence to maybe the John Lewis advert.
Well, but whoever was smart enough to realise that, however the kind of cultural establishment reacted to that, you know, and we had BBC Breakfast presenters going to Kemi Badenoch, but you haven't seen Adolescence. That was her best moment, by the way, was to just go, no, I haven't. Because you know what? At that point, neither had the vast majority of the British public, and still haven't. Something doing 8 million is amazing numbers for Netflix. Sure. It still means the vast majority of people hadn't seen a thing. And it was still, I watched it as a TV show. I thought it was a great drama.
Yeah.
But I saw immediately that it was a drama. You know, if you look statistically, I'm not saying that people that come from loving nuclear families don't produce toxic boys that commit crimes, but statistically, you know, he's got this hard-working dad.
Yeah.
You know, like he didn't look at him at football. You know, but it's a drama, right? It is a drama. How that it developed with Starmer, who just kept referring to it as a documentary. No, you made that mistake once, mate. You make it a second time, it's starting to look like an agenda. And then, we're going to show it in schools. And that's the starting point is you going like, is that how you're starting a conversation with boys? Is like, don't you dare end up like with this extreme example of a horrific human being. That can't be the start of this debate. It's got to like, what's going on? What's wrong? How do you feel?
It was well shot and well acted, wasn't it? But
I thought so, but a lot of people even hate it as a drama. But like, again, this is the problem you get into with the right, where this is not a great time for nuance. So if you just say like, I liked it as a drama, but I don't like the way it's been extrapolated to reflect real life, people go, it was a fucking shit drama. You're getting paid to say that by...
No, that
well, you're
episode
trying
one-
to get your own Netflix show. I'm going, look, I am sadly so far from getting a Netflix show. It's not even funny.
that will hopefully after this goes, we'll get some
Yeah,
Netflix.
it's in the bag.
Yeah, that first episode, I got a bit bored as it went on, and I did feel a bit morally lectured at as well. But the first episode was phenomenal, like the way the pacing and all of that.
Yes, and the lack of sort of clarity about who it would be.
Yeah.
You know, I was genuinely on the edge of my seat. But the fact that there are people in our political and cultural class that can't see the difference between a TV show. And I do think there was something that happened, I guess, with teenage boys where, like, it's just the way people just say Andrew Tate. Like, you know, just I guarantee that young people right now, if you and I know who Andrew Tate is, they're not watching Andrew Tate. They're not even watching the second generation of Andrew Tate. They all know who he is, but the male influencers now would have split off into many, many different things. We won't fucking know because we're old, right? So when you're just sitting there, every time something bad happens, going, so the Andrew Tates of this world, you just sound like an old fart. Like it must have been the same during the punk era, you know? So it's all about, if you say we need a discussion with boys, I 100% agree. But how you start that discussion and your self-evident motivations for, if it seems like you just want to get something out of it, why would they listen to you?
I get wound up as well by what you were talking before about a lot of female teachers, and so we deal with men or boys in a female way. Even when we're talking about sort of men being able to express themselves, you said they do it in a different way to women. It's sort of grunts and metaphors, and no one says what they're feeling. But whenever I've seen that expressed on TV, often by women, it's kind of the loose women kind of vibe, that kind of show. It's like we need men to cry more. And I think some men do cry, and I cry if I watch a movie, but I don't need to cry. I don't think I need to.
No, yeah, I do. I'm a big crier, by the way.
Yeah.
But that is just a thing I've come to in late middle age. Cry
Happens as you get older as well.
It's
Doesn't it?
pathetic. Truly pathetic. Even as I'm crying, I'm looking at myself going, loser, you know,
Yeah.
because I am that kind of bloke. But I do think that this thing of saying, if you're saying men need to be empathetic, they need to cry more, they need to listen more, you're sort of just listing, what you're sort of saying is men need to be more like women, right?
Yeah.
These are stereotypically female things. That's quite prescriptive. That's not an answer. And also you get this other thing in the kind of sort of liberal space where they'll say like a real man would cry. And you go, you would never say a real woman anything.
Yeah.
Would you? You wouldn't go, oh, a real woman would be competitive in the boardroom. A real woman would negotiate for a higher salary. People wouldn't dare say this shit. So there are a number of double standards in look, I'm nearly 50, right? When you talk about male privilege, I can think of examples of where I would have benefited from it. When I was younger, there were some jobs I went for. I was not the best candidate and I got the job. You know, I can think of situations where I've been privileged in some ways, not exclusively. And I think for any person who's working class, it's a different question yet again. But that people have been very slow to catch on of what that means to a person who's young and male today. You know, because they're growing up at a time when, young women are out earning and out learning men, you know, to quite an advanced age now. Universities dominated by women. But it's taken, I think, too long to change the discussion. It is changing, but I think that a lot of time's been lost.
Yeah, it's positive though. It's positive to see it.
It's moving in a positive way. Absolutely.
You're right about that John Lewis advert, because only when the way you said it was really interesting, because I hadn't even thought about it, that I don't remember ever seeing a guy not presented as the bumbling fool. And they keep telling us, everyone keeps telling us, like, you need to see yourself represented on the TV or whatever. Well,
can't be what I can't see.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to adverts, and it's funny because then when it comes to adverts, people, well, then they'll dismiss it and go, well, well, you're just being hypersensitive or you're being woke now. You go, but you've drilled in the message of representation. I'm sort of saying,
either we do it or we don't.
Yeah, exactly. Either it all matters or none of it matters.
Man, it's weird to think, what did that do, I suppose? I'm 36, so that all started happening by the time I was 10, 15 years old. So, and anyone else my age, we've now had our entire adult lives. We've only ever seen ourselves represented on screen as bumbling idiots and stupid. Horrible.
Well, it's just overcorrection. That's the sad thing about, society. It's like the girl boss phenomenon in films. Rather than slowly evolving and saying, yes, we do have a lack of female central characters and heroes, but how can we do this in a way that women want to watch, because there's no evidence that the girl boss type characters actually attracted female audience. Biggest film for women was Barbie, right? And so that's what I always find disappointing about both humans and culture and politics is the wild overcorrection. So I've no doubt now we've got the John Lewis advert, there'll be other adverts of just blokes fucking hugging it out.
And I'm here for that.
Yeah, just blokes just being like rounded human beings and stuff like that. But I think it was a sort of watershed moment. But it was also, you know what the stupid thing was? It was just common sense. Is that most people aren't in this space of discourse, just thinking negatively about men day in, day out. And for a lot of people, wives of husbands, mothers of sons, they'll go, oh, well, that was lovely. They won't sit there and think, oh, but what about us? Or what about the fact that the woman in it was just doing some tidying up, or as some people have pointed out, they'll just think this is a lovely image and a lovely sentiment.
And it was a lovely sentiment.
Well, a lot of people hate it. And the one criticism I think really lands is that it's not very Christmassy. And that is 100% true. It's not.
Yeah, and I suppose, for me, I don't have a son. I can empathise. I'm not like, on a kind of spectrum.
You can imagine,
I can imagine what it might be like to have a son.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny. Those are people with lived experience, like as though we can't speculate outside, a little bit outside the realm of our direct identity. It was mad. I remember Barack Obama. It's funny with the left because they loved him for a while, and he actually started making kind of anti-woke noises quite a while ago. And he said, well, we can't have a situation where people say, well, you can't talk on that because you're not directly from that community.
Yes.
And then they decided, oh, he's a prick.
Can you do it? Because when you did your star mode, it was actually better than... Because are you able to shut off your nose when you speak?
It's kind of just... it's almost like when I started learning, it was just doing that. Not saying
you learn them. Did you do impression?
And some of the words,
Dr. Evil,
barely get out of his mouth.
Like £1 million. What is Dr. Evil? Not Austin Powers.
There's that way that he talks when he's not fluent. He's not a fluent communicator. No. And I know it's an easy target comedically, but it's funny.
Well, you should be. Barack Obama is an amazing orator, isn't he?
Yeah, tremendous. Could sell ideas to me that I don't like.
Yeah.
And Farage, this is where it's so funny with all these figures you get now, whether it's Musk, Trump, or Farage, is like they inspire such either devoted followings or fanatical critics that people can't admit that they're a mixed bag of things. Like you can say that's good, that's bad, and Farage. It's a rhythm thing. It's like what stand-ups all strive for. Is there's a way, that Nigel talks, where every third or fourth word will have an emphasis, and it keeps you involved. And if you look,
Obama did that as well. Can you do Obama?
I can't. Yeah, all I remember was a change is on the way. That was it. But I'm only doing an impression of another guy doing it. But like the first rule of politics, communication. If you can't sell an idea, you're nowhere. Like you're dead in the water. So it doesn't matter what all the policy or all the well-meaning. Maybe Keir Starmer is a great bloke that really wants great things. If you can't engage people, that's the doorstep moment for politicians. So it's not just frivolous to point out he's got a stupid voice.
Yeah,
it's like the problem is if you have a stupid voice, okay, right, Gordon Brown wasn't the best communicator, but if you also then don't have a coherent policy position, and then you also keep U-turning on stuff, and then you say Ireland the strangers one week and fuck the racists the next week, it just he's end up in a space of standing for almost nothing.
And that's Keir Starmer. You will be standing for something in your tour. That's a segue. And your podcast also stands for things. Tell me a little bit about where people can go and get those kinds of things.
So, the tour, Basic Bloke 2, There's No Bloke Without Fire, which no one likes as a title, by the way. I thought it'd be funny to just do a sequel, but that was just me on that one. But don't be put off by the title, right? As sequels go,
title.
It's what's that?
It's a good title.
Well, in conversation it is. Whenever I say it to the audiences, they go, A lot of the audience think I should have gone with Blokeback Mountain, which I think is
Blowback mouse.
It sounds more like a gag, or maybe just come up with a new name, I suppose. But the point is, the show is, and I know comedians always say this, but it's the best I've done. Like I think that maybe I've got like my desire, or the risk has come back to my comedy a little bit more. Definitely willing to take a few more risks on this tour. Last one, I loved doing the last one, but it was very mainstreamy. This has definitely got a bit more bite to it. So people go on Live Nation, and because I'm so desperate to get to every part of the UK, it's geographically impossible that I'm not within 15 miles of you. So if you live in a town in the UK, I mean, predominantly in England, but also Belfast, just get on Live Nation. And then the podcast, what most people think is, it started off as an interview type thing, but I'm not as like you can listen. I can't. I love talking. So I get me and usually another comic. We just make jokes about the news in the old-fashioned way, before all the topical shows just disappeared. And I do that usually twice weekly. And it's called what most people think, actually, because the producer of the MASH report said to me once. He said the great thing about you, Geoff, is you communicate by the means of what most people think. But and I still don't know if he was taking a piss.
I think it might be a backhanded compliment.
Well, I don't know, but it sounded like revolutionary. I was going, yeah. I mean, it was like once I had a meeting with a TV production company, and this was after Brexit, and they said we want to talk more to people with alternative opinions. I went, by alternative, do you mean the majority? Because in their mind they were fair play to them. They had me in for a chat, but I was still like this niche thing. But yeah, the podcast, I love doing the podcast, and I love it. Just like the stand up and the podcast, I love it because it's unfiltered. I decide what's in it. You know what I mean? It's not subject to an edit or a legal team or any of that stuff. So that's probably, if people are just going to consume anything I do, either of those things.
Well, it's a great podcast, and you're amazing on stage. I love that guy. I love that backhanded compliment you got. I think that's I think he was just all those. You speak to the cavemen, don't you? You speak to all those cavemen.
Well, I mean, in fairness to him, he was like, we used to like clash over things, but the fact remains is that he had a topical show. And he created a space for someone even at all right of centre, which maybe there should be more of it. But, even to this day, that hasn't really happened anywhere else. So, it was great fun doing the MASH report, especially because there would be a lot of, the jokes would come from one direction and then I would come on. And it was so easy to seem edgy.
Yeah.
And the audience were, fair play to them, they were like a BBC type audience, but I always got a great reaction. And just sorry, I realised we were trying to wrap up here, but when I did the first episode of that, what was interesting was we did a run through together, and I don't think they were trying to be mean, but none of the cast laughed at my bit. It just wasn't their thing, right?
Yeah.
And I was really worried. I'd
be shitting myself.
I was shitting myself. I was 3 days in the bad place. And then we did the on-camera rehearsal on the day of the first record, and the cameramen were all laughing at what I said, and I thought, I think I'm going to be all right, because the cameramen are like, well, they're just normal blokes, right?
Yeah.
What most people think.
Not the elite, not the liberal elite.
The avocado. I don't know what the cliches are now. I think they changed. The original was avocado munching. I always thought it was weird because you don't really munch an avocado.
Just people who think, yeah, that's true. Yeah. It sort of almost slips down your
throat. Karate. That was Suella Braverman. She did like a whole list.
Yes.
She. But the truth is, I genuinely do hate avocado. So that is not an affection.
I love an avocado.
It's disgusting.
No, they're great. They're great.
How can something that's like not meat be that greasy?
That's what I like about it, and they ruin rainforests or something, don't they? They're really bad. I think you're not supposed to eat them. They're really
I like
bad.
the fact that it actually, for liberal people, their addiction actually throws into focus their own paradox morally.
Yeah. Yes. Well, exactly. And now loads of cafes we don't serve avocados because of what they do to the world or something like that.
Have yourself a chia seed.
Yeah. I had the only time I told a, because just that fear that you have from the comedy, are they going to be okay? Was I was doing this gig. I was doing a theatre show with Richard Dawkins in Belfast, and I was nervous anyway because he's Dawkins, and what are you talking about? I don't know about all the science and all that stuff. And beforehand, someone tweeted and said, "I'm in a big crowd tonight," and all this stuff. And someone said, "Ask him about his favourite horoscope." So I knew that then I couldn't then not make that my first question. What's your horoscope?
It's funny.
Yeah, you can't not then. But it meant that for an hour I was suffering. Horrible.
Yeah.
And then I went on stage and it was very echoey as well.
Did you say it weirdly as well?
I said, well,
Yeah, I mean, you have to, like, the conviction matters because, like, comedy's so delicate. What's your favourite horoscope? Like, if it went up halfway through.
Well, it was so echoey anyway, and he was the whole time he couldn't quite hear because it was very echoey.
Oh, and if someone asks you to repeat something that's supposed to be funny.
He just went, it took a good few seconds, which were the longest seconds of my life. And it was one of those where the audience need the permission of him to laugh before they laugh. And eventually he did go, oh, I'm not answering that. And then everyone laughed and it was okay. But that gave me a little insight into your world. And I go,
yeah, no, literally,
I respect it.
Your personality just falls away from the inside.
Who's a heretic you admire?
A heretic I admire. I don't know. I didn't give it much thought. Yeah. I mean, it's funny at the moment, like Bill Burr is under revision by everybody.
Yeah.
I always kind of thought that he's just always never wanted the easy laugh. So I think back once upon a time he was going at the bankers, so that was quite lefty, and then he moved like maybe more Republican friendly, and then recently he said stuff that people said are woke. I just think his main guiding principle, now the Saudi thing, is another thing entirely. But I always think he's sort of been guided by he doesn't want to get the easy laugh, you know.
I do get that, and I was going to say before you but
the problem for him now is he's pissed off the woke lot with the Saudi thing. There's pissed
off everyone.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. But I just thought that's one thing I suppose I've always thought is like there's some. It's quite you want a tricky par five when it comes to comedy. You want to kind of slightly challenge. I'm not an edgelord, but it's nice to feel like you're taking risks, and certainly on this show, like I'm back in, full risk-taking mode.
Yeah, Louis C.K. used to be really good with that, taking those risks.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing about American comics is that we can't do it in this country. Like, it's just British comics. There's natural self-deprecation. Well, but we have to caveat everything, me included. We do the fucking terms and conditions. Yeah. You go, and I think this, and not everybody, and of course, I'm not saying this, and I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Whereas American just go, so why the fuck are women always yapping their fucking mouths? You go,
that's good, Bill Burr.
Well, I mean, I've listened to him long enough, but like
wow,
you just sort of think like we don't have. I try to have a bit of swagger, but I do think America really invented stand-up. So they've always, whether it's Dave Chappelle or whether it's
Seinfeld or something,
Bill Burr, or people like that. There's just a degree of confidence that I don't think.
Robin Williams back in the day.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy. I mean, Eddie Murphy was the first for me. Like that, you just thought, God, how do you do? Well, like doing voices, like just all the fun stuff.
But Louis C.K., I remember just a few years ago, he came out and he made this joke about paedophiles, and he just said, like it's the worst thing ever. You go to prison and all these things. Yeah. So it must be really good.
It must be, yeah.
It must feel good.
I mean, that's an example of that thing. I don't know whether that was not saying that what he was accused of was in any way related to paedophilia, but unfortunately for him, when routines like that.
I see, yeah.
Resurface, But that's it. Like that's the hardest idea.
Do you think a Brit would avoid that joke?
Who's that?
Would a Brit in Britain avoid that kind of joke? Maybe on TV?
Yeah, no, not necessarily. But it would be, like I say, the terms and conditions, the sort of Hugh Grant, like, and maybe I wouldn't. I'm certainly I wouldn't say this is an endorsement on any level, and far be it from me to say, it's like that. That's the thing. I just wish I had that bravado.
Got to be more American about things.
Well, on this tour, he said,
"Yeah, you will be.
I am.
You are.
I am. Yes.
We'll put links down below to that. And yeah, people, please, Geoff Norcott is one of the best out there. All I hear about is how good he is as well. Everyone who's going to his shows at the moment, whenever I watch him, I'm cracking up. I was cracking up the whole time just now. So please go to his tour. We'll have a link down there. Listen to his podcast. It's one of the best out there as well. He's been wonderful. So please put lovely comments and things, because there'll be angry ones anyway, won't there? So can we fill that with some of the nice ones? I know a lot of people are going like, oh, well, I don't usually comment, but put some nice comments in there. Hit the like and keep watching this channel.
Yeah. So my BBC person, was everything I said there all right?
Sweet. Oh.